Have you ever stood over a potted tomato plant, puzzled by its yellowing leaves, wondering how something so simple could feel so frustrating? If you're nodding, you're not alone. Container gardening is supposed to be easy and joyful, especially for those of us with limited space or less physical mobility. But far too often it turns into a silent struggle, wilting basil soggy soil and a creeping feeling of failure. The truth is, most container garden disasters aren't about lack of love or effort. They're about tiny mistakes we weren't taught to notice. And in today's gentle guide, I want to walk beside you and share 5 of the most common but easily avoidable mistakes I've seen again and again. Mistakes I've made myself. And more importantly, how to correct them with grace, confidence, and a touch of wisdom. Whether you're nurturing herbs on a sunny porch or coaxing cherry tomatoes from a thrifted barrel, these lessons can turn frustration into flourishing. Let's start with something that surprises almost every gardener, no matter how long they've been at it. Size really does matter. Let me take you back to a summer afternoon on my neighbor Ruth's porch. She was proud of her little herb corner, sweet basil, thyme, and a cherry tomato plant tucked into dainty ceramic pots she'd collected over the years. But a few weeks in, the basil looked stunted. The tomato was wilting and the thyme had turned a dull gray green. "I water them every morning," she said, confused. But when we gently pulled one of the plants out, the roots were circling in tight spirals, choking themselves in frustration. The problem wasn't her care, it was the container. This is one of the most overlooked yet damaging mistakes in container gardening, choosing containers that are simply too small for the plant's root system. We often fall in love with how a pot looks, its color, its shape, the way it matches the patio furniture. But plants don't care about appearances, they care about space. Think of roots like the lungs and stomach of a plant. They need room to stretch, breathe, and absorb nutrients. When roots hit the limits of a cramped pot, several things happen all at once. First, they can't hold enough moisture even if you water regularly. Second, they can't pull in enough nutrients no matter how good your soil is. And third, they become root-bound, twisting around in tight circles, eventually suffocating the plant from the inside out. So, how do you know if your container is too small? Look for these signs: yellowing leaves starting from the bottom, stunted growth, and the need to water more frequently than normal. These are the plant's quiet cries for help. Now here's the good news. You don't have to give up beauty for size or break your back. For seniors or anyone with limited strength, there are lightweight options made from resin or fiberglass that look just like ceramic, but are far easier to lift and move. And if you already have heavy pots, rolling plant caddies can be lifesavers. Let's get practical. For herbs like basil or mint, aim for a pot that's at least 8 to 10 inches in diameter. Leafy greens like lettuce and spinach do best in containers 10 to 12 inches wide and deep. For peppers or cherry tomatoes, you'll need a 15-gallon pot minimum. Full-sized tomato plants, think 20 gallons or more. It may seem like a big upfront investment, but buying the right size pot once is far cheaper than replacing a dying plant season after season. Don't forget, garage sales and thrift shops are gold mines for large containers. A chipped ceramic pot can still host a thriving cucumber, and a plastic storage bin with drainage holes can grow a whole salad mix. So before you plant that next seed, pause. Measure your container. Give your plant the room it deserves, because when the roots have space, everything above the soil flourishes in return. Years ago, I visited a friend named Harold, who proudly invited me to see his backyard tomato factory. Dozens of containers lined his sunny patio, each one home to a hopeful young plant. But something felt off. The leaves were curling under the soil, had a faint swampy smell, and the bottom of the pots looked too clean. "I water them twice a day," he said proudly. My heart sank. We tipped one pot, and a trickle of water poured out like soup. The roots had been sitting in a stagnant pool for weeks. This brings us to mistake number 2, poor drainage. It's perhaps the most misunderstood and most fatal issue in container gardening. When water collects at the bottom of a pot and has nowhere to go, your plant's roots essentially begin to drown. They can't access oxygen, can't absorb nutrients properly, and soon rot sets in silently out of sight until it's too late. What's heartbreaking is that many people think they're doing everything right. They water diligently, they choose beautiful pots, and still their plants suffer. Often the issue lies beneath the surface, literally. So how do you know if drainage is the problem? Here are a few telltale signs. Water pools on top and takes too long to sink in. Leaves start yellowing from the bottom up. The base of the stem feels soft or mushy. There's a musty, sour odor coming from the soil. If you notice any of these symptoms, it's time to check the bottom of your pot. Many decorative containers come with just one tiny hole, or worse, none at all. That's like trying to empty a bathtub with a coffee straw. For a 12-inch container, you should have at least 4 to 5 drainage holes. Bigger pots need more. Now, if you're working with heavy ceramic or clay pots that don't have holes, don't despair. There are 2 great solutions. First, you can drill holes using a ceramic drill bit. They're affordable and easy to find at hardware stores. Just drill slowly. Keep the bit wet and wear safety goggles. If drilling isn't an option, try the double pot method. Plant your garden in a smaller plastic pot with drainage, and then nestle that pot inside the decorative container. After watering, just lift it out to drain. One dangerous myth needs to be cleared up here. Putting gravel or rocks at the bottom of a container does not help drainage. In fact, it does the opposite. It creates a water trap and raises the saturation zone closer to the roots. What should go at the bottom? Just a simple mesh screen or coffee filter to keep soil from leaking out, and then good quality potting mix. For those of us with limited mobility or less sensitive touch, there's the trusty finger test. Stick your finger about 2 inches into the soil. If it feels soggy, you've got a problem. If it's just gently moist, you're in the sweet spot. Remember, healthy roots are the foundation of every thriving plant. And roots need air just as much as water. Get your drainage right and you'll give your garden the breathing room it's been craving all along. One morning, I got a call from my cousin Martha. She was in tears over her container garden. I did everything right, she said. Good pots, full sun, regular watering, but everything looked sad. I drove over with a bag of potting mix and asked her to show me what she'd used. She proudly pointed to 3 giant bags labeled garden soil. And there it was, mistake number 3. Using garden soil in containers is like trying to fill a balloon with cement. It might go in, but it won't move, breathe, or support life. You see, garden soil is designed for open beds where worms weather and deep earth naturally break things up and create air pockets. Containers don't offer that kind of ecosystem. When you put dense garden soil in a pot, it compacts hard. Water can't flow through. Air can't circulate. And roots, they suffocate in silence. So, what's the solution? Potting mix. Not topsoil, not compost alone, and definitely not yard soil. Look for bags labeled potting mix, container mix, or soilless mix. These are designed to be fluffy, well-draining, and rich in the kind of structure container plants crave. A good mix includes ingredients like peat moss or coconut coir perlite, and sometimes vermiculite, all of which help balance water retention with drainage. And yes, I hear you. Potting mix can be pricey, but let me offer 2 ways to stretch your dollar. First, mix 3 parts potting mix with 1 part compost, homemade or store-bought. This gives you a nutrient boost without sacrificing airflow. Second, reuse your potting mix year after year. Just refresh it each spring by adding compost and a balanced, slow-release fertilizer. For seniors, there's another advantage. Potting mix is lighter than garden soil. That means your containers are easier to move, lift, and water. A win-win for backs and budgets. Here's a quick test to make sure your current soil is up to the task. Take a handful of damp soil and squeeze it. If it clumps into a hard ball that doesn't fall apart when you poke it, it's too heavy. If it crumbles gently, you're golden. And if you're ever unsure while shopping, lift the bag. Potting mix should feel light and airy. If it feels like a sack of bricks, leave it behind. Let's make a deal, you and I. Before planting anything new this season, check your soil. Read the bag. Do the squeeze test. If you've been using the wrong type, there's no shame in switching now. It could be the turning point your garden's been waiting for. Let me tell you about my first attempt at container gardening. I was excited, inspired, and if I'm being honest, a little greedy. I had one beautiful half-barrel planter and a table full of seedlings. Lettuce, kale, basil, marigolds, a tiny tomato plant. I wanted it all in one pot. It looked lush for the first week, but then everything started to stretch yellow and struggle. That thriving garden turned into a battleground. and I had no idea why. Mistake number 4 is something many of us do with the best intentions: overcrowding. When you're working with limited space, it feels logical to squeeze in just one more plant. After all, the pot still looks roomy, right? But to a plant, that empty air isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. In a crowded container, plants compete fiercely for light, nutrients, and water. Their roots tangle and compete underground, while their leaves shade each other out above. The result: weak, leggy stems, stressed growth, and poor harvests. A tomato plant planted too close to basil might fight so hard for sun that neither produces fruit. Here are some symptoms that your container is too crowded. Plants look tall, but not full, spindly and reaching for the light. Lower leaves turn yellow and drop off. You're watering constantly, but the soil still dries out fast. You get lots of flowers, but not much fruit. Now I know how hard it is to see a big container with just one lonely plant in it. But gardening is like baking. More ingredients don't always make it better. The spacing on seed packets and plant tags isn't a suggestion, it's biology. When a label says 18 inches apart, it means center to center, not edge to edge. Let me offer you a few go-to spacing tips. In a 12-inch pot, grow one small tomato plant or 3 to 4 herbs like chives or thyme. For an 18-inch container, try one large tomato or pepper or 6 to 8 leafy greens. In a 24-inch container, you can grow one large central plant with a few small herbs tucked around the edges, but even that needs careful monitoring. Why does this matter so much for senior gardeners? Because well-spaced plants are easier to care for. You can reach between them to prune spot disease early and harvest without strain. Plus, healthier plants naturally resist pests and fungus, saving you the work later. Here's a quick activity: walk out to your garden and measure the distance between your plants. Compare that to what the tag says. If you've been overcrowding, don't feel bad, you're learning. Consider transplanting, or at the very least, thinning things out. It may feel counterintuitive, but in gardening, giving less often gives more. Every summer, my neighbor June faithfully watered her potted flowers at 7:00 a.m. and again at 6:00 p.m. like clockwork. Rain or shine, hot or cool, the watering can came out like it was part of her heartbeat. But one day, I noticed her petunias were drooping. The soil was soggy, and the air smelled musty. They just need a little more love, she said. But what they really needed was a break. This brings us to mistake number 5, watering by schedule instead of condition. And it's more common than you might think. We often treat our plants like house guests, offering refreshment on a polite, fixed schedule. But plants don't drink like we do. They take in water as needed, and if we keep the soil constantly wet, their roots become lazy and weak and eventually begin to rot. Here's the simple truth: overwatering kills more container plants than underwatering ever could. Roots need oxygen just as much as they need moisture. If the soil is constantly soggy, roots suffocate and decay. Ironically, your well-meaning care becomes the silent killer. So how do you know when to water? The finger test is your best friend. Stick your index finger about 2 inches into the soil. If it feels dry at that depth, it's time to water. If it still feels moist, wait another day or two. For those who find bending tough, a wooden chopstick or long-handled soil tester works just as well. Responsive watering is key. On a hot, windy day, your plant may need a deep drink. On a cool, overcast morning, maybe nothing at all. After a heavy rain, they might be set for days. Let your plants tell you what they need, not the calendar. When you do water, do it thoroughly. Water should flow from the bottom of the pot. That's how you know it's reached the entire root zone. Shallow watering leads to shallow roots, making plants more vulnerable to drought and heat stress. And timing matters too. The best time to water is in the early morning between 6:00 and 10:00 a.m. This gives leaves time to dry during the day, preventing fungal disease. Avoid watering in the evening unless absolutely necessary. For those with arthritis or limited strength, lightweight watering cans with long spouts or soaker hoses with timers can make watering less of a chore. Some even use self-watering containers with reservoirs, perfect for forgetful days or travel. Your action step this week: start a simple garden journal. Track when and why you water, how the plants respond, and what changes you see. Within weeks, you'll know your garden's rhythm, and your plants will thank you with stronger roots, fuller blooms and healthier fruit. Last spring, a sweet woman named Dolores sent me a photo of her garden nook, a cozy corner of her porch with ivy-covered trellises and a bench she'd thrifted for $10. It was charming. She'd tried planting peppers, cucumbers, and even strawberries in containers around the space, but nothing grew. I feed them, I water them, I talk to them, she said. They just won't bloom. I asked her one simple question. How much sun does that spot get? She paused. Oh, maybe a few hours. That's mistake number 6, planting without considering sunlight. And it's a quiet killer, especially in container gardening. We tend to choose spaces that are visually beautiful or convenient to reach, but our plants have their own needs. And sunlight isn't a suggestion, it's a survival essential. Every plant falls into one of 3 light categories: full sun, 6+ hours, partial sun, partial shade, 3 to 6 hours, or full shade, less than 3 hours. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and most herbs, they're full sun lovers. Lettuce, kale, spinach, or some flowers like impatiens, they'll tolerate partial shade. But if you're trying to grow tomatoes in a shady corner, they simply won't fruit no matter how lovingly you care for them. One of the unique benefits of container gardening is mobility. You're not tied to the ground, you can move your pots. But many of us don't take advantage of this. Maybe the porch only gets morning sun, or the patio bakes in the afternoon. Observe your space. Track the sunlight throughout the day. What seems sunny at 10 a.m. might be completely shaded by 2 p.m. Here's a tip: take a small notebook or use your phone and check on your intended garden space every 2 hours from sunrise to sunset for one full day. Jot down when the sun hits, when it fades, and for how long it sticks around. You'll be surprised at how different morning and afternoon light can be in the same spot. Now, what if your space doesn't get full sun? Don't give up. Choose crops that thrive in low-light conditions like leafy greens, herbs such as parsley and mint, or root vegetables like radishes. You can also consider installing rolling plant trays to shift containers into sunlight as the seasons change. One of my favorite hacks is using reflective surfaces to redirect light. A mirror, a sheet of aluminum foil behind the plant, or even a pale-colored wall can bounce extra rays toward your garden. It's a small trick with big impact. The takeaway: plants are solar-powered. No matter how perfect your soil or watering schedule, without enough light, they'll never thrive. Match your plant to its light needs, and if needed, move the pot, not the dream. Let me tell you about the year I got a little too eager. It was early March, and after a few warm days, I convinced myself that spring had fully arrived. Out came the pots, the trowel, the seed packets. I planted tomatoes, basil, and even a pepper or 2 on my sunny deck. For 3 glorious days, everything looked perfect. Then came the cold snap. Overnight temperatures dipped below 40 degrees, and by morning my garden looked like a salad left out in the freezer. I'd made mistake number 7, planting too early. One of the biggest errors in container gardening is ignoring seasonal timing. Just because your calendar says spring or the store has already stocked summer plants doesn't mean it's the right time for your zone. Container plants are even more vulnerable than in-ground gardens because they don't benefit from the Earth's insulating warmth. Their roots feel every fluctuation in temperature, and sudden cold or heat can shock them beyond recovery. The same is true in reverse. Many gardeners plant too late. They wait until mid-June to set out lettuce or spinach, only to watch them bolt from the heat. Or they try to grow cool season crops like broccoli in July, not realizing the plant will struggle in summer's intensity. Here's the fix: know your USDA plant hardiness zone and learn your area's frost dates. In the US, you can easily find this by typing in your zip code online. Look up your last spring frost date and your first fall frost date. These 2 benchmarks are gold when it comes to container gardening success. Warm season plants like tomatoes, basil, and cucumbers should be planted after the last spring frost, when night temperatures stay consistently above 50 degrees. Cool season crops like lettuce, kale, and peas prefer to go in before the last frost or in late summer for a fall harvest. For those who are eager to get started earlier, consider using small greenhouses, frost blankets, or even moving your containers indoors overnight. Just remember that rapid shifts in temperature, like dragging a warm pot into cold air, can still stress young plants. Seniors may find seasonal timing especially important. It reduces waste, saves money, and allows you to plan your energy around manageable garden windows. A well-timed planting means fewer losses, fewer surprises, and more satisfaction. So, before you dig into that bag of soil, pause and check your calendar. Let the weather be your guide, not just your excitement. Gardening is a partnership with nature, not a race to beat it. A few years back, I visited a lovely gentleman named Walter. He had the neatest container garden I'd ever seen, rows of tomatoes, bush beans, and even dwarf citrus in beautiful terracotta pots. They were so lush last month, he said, frowning. But now, everything's pale and slow. I asked him when he last fertilized. Oh, he said sheepishly, I thought the potting mix came with everything they needed. This brings us to mistake number 8, forgetting to feed your container plants. And it's such an easy mistake to make. When we buy potting soil, especially the expensive kind, it's tempting to think it contains all the nutrients our plants will need for the whole season. But container plants are like house guests who can't leave to grab groceries. What's in the pot is all they've got, and over time it runs out. Unlike in-ground gardens, container soil doesn't regenerate. Rain can't carry minerals in, and earthworms can't enrich from below. Every time you water, nutrients slowly leach out the bottom through the drainage holes. It's like filling a bathtub with the drain open. You have to keep adding more just to maintain the level. So, how do you fertilize the right way? There are 2 main strategies: slow-release granules and liquid feeding. Slow-release fertilizers are mixed into the soil at planting and gradually release nutrients over time. Think of it as a multivitamin. Liquid fertilizers are added to water every week or 2, like giving your plant a nutritious smoothie. For beginner-friendly maintenance, I recommend this rhythm. Mix a balanced, slow-release fertilizer into your soil at the start of the season. Look for numbers like 10-10-10 or 5-5-5. Then every 2 weeks during the growing season, supplement with a diluted liquid fertilizer, especially for heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, and squash. For herbs and leafy greens, a more diluted mix or a monthly dose is usually sufficient. What if you prefer natural options? Compost, tea fish emulsion, and seaweed extract are fantastic organic fertilizers that are gentle on plants and on us. They may have a bit of an earthy aroma, but your garden will love them. And remember, too much of a good thing can be harmful. Over-fertilizing leads to salt buildup in the soil, which can damage roots and cause leaf burn. If in doubt, err on the side of less but consistent. If measuring and mixing feels intimidating, consider purchasing a moisture and nutrient meter. They're affordable and can guide you in knowing when your soil needs a boost. It's a perfect tool for seniors who want peace of mind without guessing games. Walter started adding a gentle liquid feed every 10 days, and within 3 weeks, his tomatoes came roaring back. Yours can too. Feeding your plants is not spoiling them, it's supporting them, just like we need a nourishing meal to feel strong and energized. Let's talk about something most of us don't think about until it's too late: rotation and movement. Last summer, my friend Evelyn had the cutest row of petunias and peppers lined along her white vinyl fence. They started off beautifully, but as the season wore on, one side of each container began to yellow and droop. The other side, still lush and green. She asked me, "Why is only the left half of my plants suffering?" The answer was simple but sneaky. Sunlight was only hitting one side of the containers day after day, and they'd never been rotated. Mistake number 9 is one that quietly affects even the most attentive container gardeners, leaving your containers in one static spot all season long without rotating or relocating them. Unlike in-ground gardens, which receive even exposure across their wide layout, containers are often up against walls, fences, or railings, creating uneven light, heat, and airflow. Over time, this leads to a lopsided plant. One side gets all the sun and photosynthesis, while the other side strains to keep up. You may notice asymmetrical growth, one-sided flowering, or even leaning stems. The fix: a simple quarter turn every week can do wonders, especially for containers that sit on hard surfaces or against walls. If your pots are on wheeled caddies or raised platforms, rotating becomes even easier. Just give them a gentle spin once a week to ensure even light exposure. There's also the issue of location. Your deck might be perfect in May but become a scorching oven in July. Or the once sunny corner might fall into shade as trees leaf out. Your garden isn't static, so your containers shouldn't be either. Here are a few movement tips. Observe light patterns every few weeks, especially after storms, seasonal shifts, or pruning nearby trees. Group containers by sun, then move them as a team if necessary. Use rolling trays, plant dollies, or even lightweight wagons to shift larger pots without strain. For seniors, these tools can prevent injury and allow you to manage your garden with ease. Another benefit to rotating and relocating, it helps prevent pests and disease. When plants sit in the same spot for months, especially on shaded patios or damp corners, they become vulnerable to fungus mildew and insect buildup. Moving containers periodically improves airflow and sun exposure, natural defenses against disease. Your homework today: pick just one container and give it a 90-degree turn. Then observe how it responds in the coming week. You might be amazed at how something so small can spark such visible improvement. Remember, plants may be rooted, but their containers don't have to be. Let me tell you a quiet truth: even the most beautiful container garden can be undone by something as small as an aphid or a mold spore. I once visited a retired teacher named Grace, who'd poured her heart into a small rooftop garden. Her containers were thriving, until one day she noticed her zucchini leaves looked dusty. "It's just from the wind," she said. But a week later, every squash plant was limp and the mildew had spread. The culprit: a late case of powdery mildew ignored too long. Which brings us to mistake number 10, failing to check regularly for pests and disease. Container gardening offers some protection from ground-based insects, but it doesn't make your plants immune. In fact, containers, because they're often placed close together and in cozy, humid environments, can become prime breeding grounds for both bugs and fungal infections. The problem is, many of us don't recognize the early signs. We walk by, glance at the greenery, and assume all is well. But by the time leaves start yellowing or wilting, the issue has usually been brewing for days, even weeks. So, how do you stay ahead of the curve? First, get into the habit of weekly inspections. You don't need to be a detective, just a gentle observer. Turn over a few leaves, look along the stems, and check the soil surface. Do you see tiny insects, holes, or a fine webbing? Is there any odd residue on the leaves? These are all signs of trouble. Here are a few of the most common container garden invaders. Aphids, tiny green, black, or white insects that cluster on new growth. Spider mites, almost invisible but leave webbing and speckled leaves. Whiteflies, small white bugs that fly up when you shake the plant. Fungal infections, yellow spots, gray fuzz, or powdery white coatings. If you catch them early, most problems can be solved naturally. A gentle spray of neem oil, diluted soap and water, or a wipe down with a damp cloth often does the trick. For fungal issues, improving airflow and removing affected leaves can stop the spread. One of the best things about container gardening: you can isolate problems. If a plant is sick, move it away from others. Quarantine it just like you would with a sick family member. This prevents full garden collapse and buys you time to treat the issue. There's also prevention. Keep your pruning tools clean. Avoid overhead watering late in the day. And if possible, avoid splashing soil onto leaves, which can carry pathogens. I always say a 5-minute inspection every week is better than a 2-week battle later. And for seniors, this gentle routine can become a peaceful ritual, an excuse to touch your plants, connect with them, and care for them with intention. Your plants can't speak, but they're always communicating. You just have to learn how to listen. You've made it, dear friend. 10 mistakes, 10 small turning points that, once recognized, can completely transform your container garden from trial and error into joy and abundance. But if your hands feel a little dirty with self-blame, please let them rest. Every gardener, no matter their age or experience, has made these mistakes, some of us twice or 10 times. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. The truth is, container gardening isn't just about soil, sunlight, or watering schedules. It's a mirror, a gentle teacher that reflects our patience, our awareness, our humility. It teaches us that success doesn't always come from doing more, but from doing thoughtfully. Slower, smarter, kinder, just like the way we live in our golden years. Think back on the mistakes we explored together, giving your plants room to grow with the right container size, ensuring they can breathe with proper drainage, feeding them with rich, well-draining potting mix, spacing them generously so they can thrive, watering not by habit but with responsiveness, honoring their light needs, not yours, planting in rhythm with the season, not the seed packet, remembering to feed, not just water, letting them turn with the sun, not sit in one place. and listening closely when something seems off because it always starts quietly. What's beautiful about container gardening is that it grows with us. It doesn't require a full acre or strong knees. It just needs attention, love, and the wisdom you've been gathering your whole life. And when you do it right, it becomes more than a garden. It becomes a sanctuary, a little corner of the world that says, I'm still growing. I still matter. So this week I invite you to pick just one of the 10 mistakes and gently fix it. Maybe you'll add some holes to a pot, or mix in a little compost, or finally give that tomato plant the space it's been craving. Small steps, big impact. And then, celebrate. Pour yourself a cup of tea, step onto the porch, and admire the life you've cultivated not just in the container, but in yourself. Which of these 10 changes are you excited to try first? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this video helped you feel a little more confident, a little more inspired, I invite you to subscribe. We share peaceful, practical gardening wisdom every single week, just for seniors like you. Until next time, happy gardening, dear friend. May your roots run deep. May your blooms be bright. And may your days, like your containers, be full of life.